My sister banned me from her wedding over my scars, then asked me for $15,000 to fund her dream venue. My name is Kayla. I'm 29 years old, and this is the story of how my own sister asked me not to stand by her side on the most important day of her life because of how I look. I never thought things between me and my sister, Lauren, she's 32 now, would come to this. We've always had a complicated relationship, but I held on to hope that beneath all the differences, there was still love. Turns out, I was wrong. Lauren was always the golden child. Tall, blonde, magnetic, the kind of beauty that turns heads in any room. I was the quieter one, bookish. I leaned into academics, kept to myself, and while I never thought of myself as unattractive, I knew I wasn't the kind of girl people chase down the street. Our parents, both 59 now, never came right out and said they had a favorite, but you could feel it, the way they looked at Lauren with that mix of pride and indulgence. It was different. It was like they saw her through a softer lens, one that always forgave, always justified. 3 years ago, everything changed. A drunk driver ran a red light and plowed into me. The impact nearly took my life. I survived, barely, but my face didn't. The left side, from temple to jaw, was shredded by shattered glass. After 3 rounds of surgery, months of physical therapy, and hours upon hours in counseling, I was pieced back together. Not whole, but surviving. The scars remained, raw and visible, a permanent reminder of that night. Through all, Lauren stayed distant. She came to the hospital once. She stood at the edge of the bed like she couldn't bear to look at me. Said she was swamped with work. She always had a reason not to visit, not to call, not to be there. I try not to take it personally. Trauma affects people differently, right? Maybe seeing me broken was too much for her. At least that's what I told myself. Then came her engagement. Last year, Lauren said yes to Matt, her boyfriend of 2 years. I was happy for her, genuinely. When she asked me to be a bridesmaid, I felt this little spark of hope. Maybe things were healing. Maybe she did want me in her life again. The next few months were filled with dresses and planning, tastings and fittings. I showed up for all of it. I smiled through it. But sometimes in photos, she'd position me to the side. Other times, she'd hand me the camera instead of including me in the shot. I noticed it, but I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe I was being too sensitive. But then, last month, she dropped the bomb. It was a sunny Thursday when Lauren asked me to meet her for lunch. Just the 2 of us. I thought maybe she wanted to talk about the final details of the bachelorette party, or maybe the seating chart. Something normal. Something sisterly. Instead, she made small talk for 15 minutes. She smiled. She complimented my earrings. And then, she dropped it. I wanted to talk to you about the wedding photos, she said. I blinked. What about them? She paused, sipped her drink, then launched in like she had rehearsed the whole thing. Matt and I have been talking, and we think it might be best if you didn't stand in the wedding party. You could still come to the wedding, of course. But for the photos, we're trying to go for a certain aesthetic, and I just worry that I didn't hear the rest of the sentence. I was too stunned. I stared at her. Are you serious right now? She nodded, completely calm. I just think it would be more comfortable for everyone. You understand, right? It's my big day, and I've worked so hard to make it perfect. I felt my throat tighten. My eyes began to sting. She kept going. She said I could help with other things, behind the scenes. Just not in the photos. Not standing next to her in front of all those people. She said it like she was doing me a favor. Then she added, without a shred of remorse, that she'd already asked a co-worker to take my place. The rest of the bridesmaids already knew. I didn't say a word. I stood up from the table, walked out of the restaurant, and didn't look back. She called. She texted. I couldn't bring myself to answer. That night, I broke. I collapsed into tears in a way I hadn't since the accident. The pain she caused was different. It hit deeper. It wasn't just rejection. It was abandonment, masked as politeness. The next day, my phone rang. It was Mom. She said Lauren had told her I was being dramatic over a small wedding change. I could barely speak, but when I did, I explained what really happened. There was silence on the other end. Then, my mom said, well, sweetheart, it is her special day. Maybe you could be a little more understanding. That sentence? It crushed me. My own mother was siding with her. Was implying that I, her daughter who survived a life-altering accident, was too much of a visual inconvenience to be part of her older daughter's wedding. I hung up. I blocked them both. I needed time. I needed space. I needed to breathe without feeling like I was the family burden. But the story wasn't over. Not even close. A week later, there was a knock at my door. It was Lauren. No warning, no text, just standing there, red-eyed, holding a coffee she probably picked up to make it seem like this was casual. It wasn't. She looked like she had been crying, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe she was here to apologize. Maybe she had realized what she'd done. But no, she sat down and launched into the latest disaster. The venue. The one she and Matt had booked, her dream location, had apparently suffered some kind of emergency. A fire, or maybe a burst pipe. Honestly, I didn't catch all the details. I was still emotionally numb. What caught my attention was what came next. They had found another venue. An even better one, she said. It had everything. Gardens, chandeliers, views straight from a bridal magazine. But there was a problem. It was $15,000 over budget. She paused, looked right at me, and said, "I know you got a settlement from your accident. I hate asking, but would you consider helping out?" I couldn't even form words at first. She had uninvited me from her bridal party because of my scars, because I might ruin the aesthetic. And now, with a straight face, she was asking me to pay for her upgraded fantasy wedding. I finally said no. Flat, firm, without apology. And then she cried. Harder this time. "You're being selfish," she sobbed. "You're punishing me for a small mistake. If you really loved me, you wanted to have this day." I stood up and opened the door. "You want to talk about selfish?" I said, my voice shaking. "You kicked me out of your wedding because you think I look ugly. You didn't even have the decency to let me respond before replacing me with a coworker. And now you're asking for 15 grand? You got nerve." She hesitated at the doorway, her eyes narrowing as the tears dried. Then she said something I'll never forget. "This always has to be about you, doesn't it? Ever since the accident, it's all been about you." And then she walked away. I stood in silence for a long time after that. My heart pounded in my chest. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. Somehow, in Lauren's twisted logic, my survival and my scars were inconveniences she'd been forced to tolerate. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, my phone has been lit up nonstop. My parents call me selfish. They said I was tearing the family apart over wedding nonsense. According to them, Lauren told everyone that I was jealous of her happiness and refusing to help out of spite. Friends have reached out. Some took my side. Others told me to just let it go for the sake of family. Even my Aunt Claire, Mom's sister, called to lecture me about forgiveness and how you'll regret this when you're older. I'm standing my ground. But I won't lie, the pressure is getting to me. It's wearing me down. I've worked so hard in therapy to accept my scars, to find peace with the face I see in the mirror. But this whole situation is dragging me backward, making me question if I really belong anywhere, especially in my own family. Am I wrong to say no? Am I cruel for refusing to help pay? Or am I finally doing the one thing I should have done years ago, protecting myself? After my refusal, Lauren's texts turned colder. Accusations, guilt trips, phrases like, "You're destroying this family," and "How can you be so heartless?" started popping up on my screen daily. I ignored them, but silence didn't stop the avalanche. Last Saturday morning, my parents showed up at my apartment. No call, no text, just there. Standing outside my door with this awkward blend of forced smiles and tension. I should have known then. It wasn't a visit. It was an ambush. "We just want to talk," Dad said as I opened the door. "Let's work this out." I let them in, thinking maybe, just maybe, they were finally going to listen to my side. Instead, it turned into a full-blown intervention. They said they were concerned about the growing divide, that I was hurting Lauren in ways I didn't understand. Then Mom dropped the bomb. "You got that settlement so you could move forward with your life, Kayla. Don't you think helping your sister would be a beautiful way to do that?" I couldn't believe it. My own mother had just tried to turn the worst moment of my life into a check she wanted me to write. I looked at her, stunned, and asked point blank, "Do you even know why I'm not in Lauren's wedding?" She fumbled. Dad looked away. "She said there was a misunderstanding," Mom muttered. "No," I replied. "She told me my face, my scars, would ruin her photos, and then replace me without telling me." The room went still. My dad finally spoke. "Look, she could have handled it better, sure, but she's under a lot of pressure. You know how Lauren gets when she's stressed." That was it. That was my breaking point. I stood up, voice trembling with rage and grief. "I'm done being the family punching bag. You've enabled her cruelty for years, and now you're asking me to pay for it? Not a chance." Mom started crying. "This isn't who you are, Kayla. You're not this cruel." I laughed. I actually laughed. A sharp, bitter sound that echoed off the walls. "No, Mom. I'm just finally standing up for myself, and you don't like it. I told them both, in no uncertain terms, that I would not be giving Lauren a penny. And if they ever showed up again to pressure me, they wouldn't be welcome in my home at all. They left, quiet and cold. I sat in the silence after they were gone, heart pounding, my hands shaking. That night, I called my cousin Elise. She's my uncle's daughter, the only one in the family who's always kept it real with me. I told her everything, from Lauren's cruel words to the money asked to the way our parents had tried to gaslight me into compliance. Elise was horrified. She told me Lauren had been spreading a very different version of events to the rest of the family. According to Lauren, I had simply refused to help with the wedding because I was jealous of her happiness. Jealous. She never told them the real reason I stepped away, because she asked me to. Elise told me I needed to speak up, not to create drama, but to tell the truth. So I did. I wrote a detailed email to our extended family, uncles, aunts, cousins. I told them exactly what happened. That Lauren uninvited me from the bridal party because she was worried my facial scars would ruin her aesthetic. That she asked me for $15,000 afterward. That she painted me as the bitter sister, when in truth, I was the one discarded like an unwanted extra. The responses poured in. Some were shocked, outraged, supportive. Others? Not so much. A few said it was still Lauren's wedding and she had every right to decide who stood beside her. But even then, they agreed. Asking me for money afterward was gross. And then came the most unexpected response. My grandmother called. When I saw my grandmother's name pop up on my phone, I hesitated. She's my mom's mom, and we've always been close, but still I wasn't sure what she had been told. I braced myself for disappointment as I answered. But instead of criticism, I got something I hadn't heard in weeks. Kayla, sweetheart, she said, her voice shaking slightly. I had no idea. She'd read my email, every word, and she was furious. Not at me, but at Lauren and my parents. She said it made her sick to think that they could treat me this way and expect me to just swallow it for the sake of peace. She told me she was proud of me, proud for standing my ground, proud for refusing to buy my way back into a family that hadn't even defended me. She said, "You've been through hell already, and the fact that they would ask more of you instead of offering love and support? Unforgivable." I started crying right there on the phone. It was the first time I felt truly seen since this whole thing started. Later that same day, I got another surprise, a call from Lauren. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. She was angry, furious, really. "How dare you humiliate me in front of the whole family," she snapped. "You've completely turned them against me." I stayed calm. "All I did was tell the truth, Lauren. If you're embarrassed, maybe that's something you should sit with." She didn't like that. She demanded I send a follow-up email, claiming I had exaggerated, that it was a misunderstanding, that she never meant it the way it sounded. I refused. She hung up. 10 minutes later, Mom called. This time her voice was ice. "You made things worse, Kayla. You should have kept it in the family." I ended the call. I was done, but the fallout wasn't over. A few days after Lauren's explosive call, my phone buzzed with a message I never saw coming. It was from Matt, her fiancé. I stared at his name on my screen for a long time, debating whether I should even open it. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. His message was short and hesitant. "Hey Kayla, would you be open to grabbing coffee? Just the two of us. I'd really like to talk." I was stunned. I hadn't heard a single word from him through all of this. I figured he either agreed with Lauren or wanted no part in the family drama. But something told me to go, so I did. We met at a quiet little cafe halfway between our neighborhoods. When he walked in, he looked awkward, tired, older somehow, like the weight of everything had finally caught up to him. He sat down and didn't beat around the bush. "I know what Lauren said to you," he began, "about the bridesmaid thing. I didn't agree with it. I told her it was wrong." I blinked. "Then why didn't you say anything?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Because I was stuck between the woman I love and the truth. And I handled it wrong. I should have said something sooner." He admitted he had watched Lauren spiral over the wedding stress, and instead of standing up to her, he tried to manage the situation quietly, hoped it would blow over. But it didn't. And now, the damage was too big to ignore. He apologized for staying silent, for not stepping in when Lauren crossed a line, and for how his inaction made me feel completely abandoned. Then he said something that surprised me even more. "I'm not here to convince you to pay for anything or to fix this for Lauren. I thought maybe you and I could clear the air. Even if you don't come to the wedding, I wanted you to know that not everyone in this family sees you the way she does." There was something deeply sincere in his voice. And for a moment, I saw what must have made Lauren fall for him in the first place. I thanked him, told him I appreciated him reaching out. He asked gently, if I would consider coming to the wedding just as a guest, even if I wasn't in the bridal party. Said it would mean a lot to Lauren. I said I'd think about it, but I already knew the answer. I wasn't going to the wedding. Not after everything. The next day, Lauren texted me again. Apparently, Matt had told her we met. She wanted to talk. I said okay. Part of me still hoped she might finally understand the hurt she'd caused. But when she showed up at my apartment, I realized nothing had changed. When Lauren walked into my apartment, she had that same tight-lipped smile I'd seen 100 times growing up. The one she wore whenever she was trying to pretend everything was fine, while pushing something sharp beneath the surface. She sat down across from me and started off surprisingly soft. "I've been thinking a lot," she said, folding her hands. "I know things got tense." Tense? That was her word for it. She continued, saying she was willing to let go of the past and move forward. I was about to respond when she added, "And I'd still be happy to have you in the bridal party, if you're open to helping with the venue cost." Just like that. Calm. Transactional. Like I was negotiating a business deal. Not being invited back into my sister's life. I sat there, stunned. "You're trying to sell me a bridesmaid dress?" She blinked. "No, of course not. I'm just saying if you're willing to help, I want you back in." I laughed, sharp, bitter, exhausted. "You don't want me back," I said. "You want my money. You want the dream wedding. You want the perfect photos. But you don't want me. Not as I am. Not with these scars. And certainly not if I come without a check attached." Her face twisted. "That's not true. I'm trying to extend an olive branch, Kayla. But you just keep punishing me." I shook my head. Punishment would be showing up at your wedding in a white dress and telling everyone the truth in the middle of your vows. What I'm doing. That's called protecting myself. She stood up then, furious. "You're twisting everything. You always twist everything. It's always about you and your accident, isn't it?" There was again. Your accident. Like it was something I was milking. Like I hadn't nearly died. Like I hadn't rebuilt my life from the ground up, one therapy session at a time. I looked her in the eye and said, "We're done, Lauren. I'm not giving you a dime. I'm not putting on a dress. And I'm not coming to your wedding." She didn't cry this time. She just turned and walked out, her heels hitting the floor like a metronome of finality. Since then, the family has split even further. My Uncle James, my dad's brother, called me after hearing the whole story. He said he was disgusted by Lauren's behavior and ashamed of how her parents handled it. He told me I had every right to walk away. Others weren't so supportive. A few cousins messaged me, saying I should just let it go. That family is family. That I'd regret this someday. But you know who didn't say that? My grandmother. She's been my anchor through all of it. She told me she won't be attending the wedding either. When I told her she didn't have to do that, she just looked at me and said, "If they can't respect my granddaughter, they don't deserve my presence." It meant everything. So now, with 3 weeks to go until the wedding, I've made my choice. I'm not going, not even to sit in the back row. 3 weeks later, the day of the wedding came, and I didn't go. Neither did my grandmother. True to her word, she stayed home. She said nothing to the rest of the family, just sent a polite RSVP decline and carried on with her weekend. We had lunch together instead. Just the two of us, sharing stories and quiet laughter over tea and fresh bread. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't glamorous. But it felt safe. It felt real. According to my cousin Elise, who did attend the wedding, things were noticeably different than Lauren had planned. The new venue was smaller, simpler. Some of the original decorations she had dreamed about were missing. A few guests whispered, asking where I was. Elise told me that when someone brought up my name, Lauren gave a rehearsed answer. Unfortunately, Kayla wasn't able to make it. No mention of the fallout. No mention of the scars. Just a vague lie she wrapped around the truth like a ribbon tied too tight. The photos were still taken. The champagne still flowed. The vows were still exchanged. But Elise said something felt hollow, like there was an invisible crack beneath all the glitter. But the real drama didn't arrive until after the honeymoon. Lauren texted me a week later. "I want to clear the air now that the wedding's over," she wrote. "Let's meet." I hesitated. I didn't want to reopen old wounds, but part of me needed closure. So I agreed. We met at a neutral spot, a quiet cafe, early afternoon. She walked in, all smiles, subdued, and maybe even a little unsure of herself. She sat down, took a breath, and said, "The wedding wasn't what I imagined without you there." For a second, I thought this might finally be a moment of clarity, an actual, genuine apology. But no, she followed it up with, "I still think you overreacted, but I want to move past this." There was again that subtle shift of blame, that refusal to own what she did. I told her calmly, You don't get to erase what happened just because the wedding's over. You kicked me out of the bridal party because of how I look. And when I said no to funding your fairy tale, you turned me into the villain. That doesn't just disappear. She crossed her arms. I'm trying to be the bigger person. I sighed. Then be the honest one. Apologize for what you did, not for how I reacted. Understand the hurt, instead of brushing it off as wedding stress. She went quiet, then said, I need time. We ended the conversation there. No resolution. Just space. But then something I never expected happened. It was about 5 days after that awkward cafe meeting with Lauren when my phone rang again. This time it was my dad. Just him. Not my mom. Not both of them together like before. And there was something different in his voice when he asked if he could come by. Just to talk, he said. No pressure. No agenda. I hesitated, but something told me to say yes. When he arrived, he wasn't his usual, guarded self. There was no stern expression, no attempt to fix things with shallow pleasantries. He looked older, tired, like the weight of everything was finally catching up with him too. He sat down across from me, folded his hands, and just said it. I've been doing a lot of thinking since the wedding. He told me that seeing his own mother, my grandmother, refuse to attend had shaken him in a way nothing else had. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't lectured. She just quietly removed herself. And that silence, he said, hit harder than any argument ever could. Then he looked me in the eye and said something I never thought I'd hear from him. I failed you, Kayla. He admitted that ever since Lauren was little, they had made excuses for her behavior. That she reminded him of himself, driven, proud, image-conscious. And so, they coddled her, protected her even when she was wrong. But in doing that, he said softly, we didn't protect you. He said he saw what was happening during my recovery, but didn't know how to handle it. That it was easier to pretend Lauren was just stressed or busy than to face the fact that she had pulled away when I needed her most. And then the wedding happened, and everything exploded. I should have stood up for you. Or she said what she said about your scars. I should have said something. I should have screamed. Tears welled in my eyes. Because for the first time, it wasn't just about right or wrong. It was about finally being seen. He asked me what I needed from him now. Another sentence I never expected. And I told him the truth. I need you to stop protecting Lauren from her consequences. I need you to treat me like I matter just as much, even if I'm not the one smiling in the photos. He nodded, said he would try, said Mom might take longer to come around, but he'd talk to her. For the first time in what felt like forever, I believed him. 2 weeks after my dad's visit, I got another call, this time from both of my parents. They invited me to dinner. Just us. No Lauren. I hesitated. The thought of sitting across the table from my mom after everything she said, the dismissal, the guilt trips, the subtle jabs that cut deeper than they looked, made my stomach twist. But something about my dad's tone stuck with me. He sounded sincere, like he had already started the hard conversations on his end. So I said yes. That night, I showed up with every emotional wall in place. But from the moment I walked in, I could feel the shift. The atmosphere was quieter, less tense. Like everyone knew this wasn't just dinner. It was a reckoning. We sat down. We ate in near silence for the first few minutes. And then, without prompting, my mom put down her fork and looked at me. She took a breath. I owe you an apology, she said. It wasn't perfect. She still made a few excuses about wedding stress and getting caught in the middle, but she also said the words that mattered. I should have stood up for you. I should have told Lauren she was wrong the moment she asked you to step down. And asking for money after that. That was wrong too. It wasn't a full unraveling of the years of favoritism, but it was something. It was the beginning of a crack in the wall she'd spent decades pretending didn't exist. I love you, she added. And I'm sorry I didn't make that clearer when it counted. I nodded. I wasn't ready to fall into her arms and forget it all, but I didn't need her to be perfect. I just needed her to try. That night, for the first time in months, we talked like a family again. Not a perfect one, not a healed one, but one that had finally stopped pretending everything was fine. As I walked out the door, my dad hugged me. My mom did too. It felt tentative, a little stiff, but real. Since then, things with them have slowly improved. Lauren, though, still silent, still bitter. We've exchanged a few surface-level texts. Nothing deeper. Nothing that sounds like a sister trying to make things right. Elise says she's been quieter lately, more reflective. Maybe she's beginning to see the cracks in her own story. Maybe not. But here's what I know now. I'm not waiting anymore. It's been 2 months since the wedding. The dust has settled. The phone calls have slowed. The arguments have gone quiet. And in that quiet, I found something I didn't expect. Peace. Not the dramatic movie scene kind of peace where everything is resolved and the family hugs it out. No, this peace is quieter, slower, earned. I didn't go to the wedding. I don't regret it. Elise told me that Lauren looked beautiful, but distracted. A few people asked where I was. Most accepted the vague excuses. But Elise said something interesting. She said Lauren didn't seem triumphant. She seemed diminished, as if, deep down, she knew something had been lost. And maybe she did. A week after they returned from their honeymoon, Lauren reached out again. She wanted to meet. Said she was ready to move on. I agreed, more out of curiosity than hope. We met at the same cafe as before. She looked tired. Her smile wasn't rehearsed this time. It was thin, fragile. I've been thinking, she said. I probably could have handled things better. That was as close as she got to an apology. She still didn't say the words I needed to hear. Not fully. She still framed her actions as wedding stress and misunderstood intentions. She said she didn't mean to make me feel excluded, like that was the issue. How I felt. I told her as gently as I could. It's not just about how I felt, Lauren. It's about what you did. She looked down at her coffee and didn't respond. We didn't fight. We didn't scream. But we also didn't fix it. Before she left, she said, I hope we can be sisters again someday. And I said, we'll see. It wasn't forgiveness. But it wasn't hatred either. It was a boundary. A line I've finally learned to draw and keep. Since then, my life has been moving forward in ways that have nothing to do with Lauren. I resumed therapy, weekly sessions, no skipping. We're working on boundaries, on rebuilding confidence, on letting go of the urge to fix people who never asked to be fixed. I've also started dating someone new. His name is Marcus. And from the moment we met, he never once looked at me like I needed to be explained. He doesn't stare at my scars. He doesn't flinch. He just sees me. He tells me I'm beautiful, and not in that overcompensating way some people do. He says it like it's obvious, like it's always been true, and I'm finally starting to believe him. I've also been volunteering with a local support group for accident survivors. I sit in a circle with strangers who understand what it's like to have your body changed in an instant, who understand the silence, the stares, the complicated journey of learning to feel whole again. It's healing in a way I never expected. Sharing stories, listening, being seen. And through all of this, one person has remained my steady, unwavering ally, my grandmother. She's been by my side through every phone call, every awkward family update, every doubt. We go on walks together. She tells me stories about when my mom and aunt were kids, stories that make a lot of things suddenly make sense. Apparently, this family has been fighting for validation long before I was born. But I'm done fighting for scraps. Looking back now, it's hard to believe how much has happened in such a short amount of time. A year ago, I would have dropped everything to be in Lauren's wedding. I would have smiled through the hurt, taken the photos from the side, said yes to the dress. Even if it meant shrinking myself to fit into someone else's perfect picture. But that version of me, she doesn't live here anymore. This version of me doesn't beg to be included. This version of me doesn't apologize for her scars. She doesn't trade silence for peace. She knows her worth, even when her own family forgets it. I've learned that healing isn't a straight path. It's messy. It backtracks. Sometimes, it feels like you're making progress, only to trip over the same wounds you thought you'd already healed. But healing does come, slowly, in moments. Like the first time I looked in a mirror and didn't flinch. Like the first time I said no and didn't feel the need to explain myself. Like the day I chose not to attend the wedding and realized I was okay. Better than okay. I was free. Free from the guilt I didn't earn. Free from the roles I was assigned. Free from the idea that love must be proven through suffering. I don't know what the future holds for me and Lauren, or even for me and my parents. I hope one day we can build something better, something more honest. But it won't come at the cost of my self-respect. I won't be the invisible sister anymore. I won't pay to be part of someone else's fairy tale. I've started writing again. Journaling. Telling pieces of my story not for validation, but for understanding. I've even thought about publishing someday. Not for revenge, but for anyone else out there who's felt like the odd one out in their own family. Because if there's one thing I've learned through this whole journey, it's this. You are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're family. You're allowed to draw lines. You're allowed to protect your peace. You're allowed to say, this is not love. So here I am, 29 years old, scarred but stronger, not standing in anyone's bridal party, but finally standing in my own power. And that's the most beautiful thing I've ever worn. If you enjoyed this story, Don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more real-life family dramas. Let me know in the comments what you think about today's story. Was it fair or totally messed up? See you in the next one.